everyone, just wanted to give you a heads up that at around the 30-minute mark, we have some references to intimacy, so if you need to skip over that for any others that might be present, if you skip to about 32 minutes, you should be able to finish the episode. Thanks for listening. Hello friends, welcome to Feeling This Life. We're a family support podcast that dives deep into the triumphs, challenges, and strategies that are part of the lives of those who care for children with blindness and visual impairments. I'm Paige Maynard, and I'm an early interventionist and teacher of the visually impaired at VIPS, Visually Impaired Preschool Services.
And I'm Dr. Cathy Smith, Director of Research at Anchor Center for Blind Children in Denver, Colorado.
I'm jcastenir. I am the Family Services Coordinator at VIPS, and my youngest child has a visual impairment.
Today I am here with Sarah Cawthon, my friend, and she is also Max's mom, and I'm excited to talk to you today and let you share your story. So I'll let you introduce yourself and tell us about yourself, your family, tell us about Max.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm a working mom. I'm actually an OBGYN and got around to parenting a little bit late in life, not for lack of trying. We had some infertility issues, but miraculously, we conceived spontaneously when I was 36, and I was worried to death during this pregnancy. I thought for sure that I would have a baby with Downs or some other difficulty because I just sort of saw my ovaries as these dried up prunes. Didn't want to do any testing though because I didn't want to have to make any hard decisions. But fortunately, she came out typical and life rolled along. My husband and I were thrilled. We had been waiting to be parents for so long. And then lo and behold, another miracle, 39. And ironically, I didn't worry at all during this pregnancy. I was, even though there were a couple things on ultrasound, but, I had a couple things with my firstborn, Samantha, who was typical. And so I didn't give it a thought. But then the morning of the delivery, Max, my son, immediately had issues with breathing. His ear looked a little funny, and he had a very small penis, which is basically we weren't sure if he was a boy or a girl. So I was thinking, well, maybe he's got some glandular issues or this or that. And nothing, too bad we could fix with shots or hormones. But within 24 hours, we got his diagnosis of CHARGE syndrome. And CHARGE syndrome, it's spelled just like it sounds, like a charge card. It's an acronym for all of the birth defects that are associated with this syndrome. And the easiest way to think of it is basically it's a birth defect of the cranial nerves. So things such as vision, hearing, speech, swallowing, all of those things would be greatly affected. And we didn't know to what degree. So I would say the early years were full of, doctor's appointments and anticipatory grief, and some things turned out okay, some things didn't, but just basically trying to fix what we could. At the end of the day, we really couldn't fix much. He is who he is, and the cards were dealt, and basically he is totally deaf and totally blind. So it came to, well, how are we going to live as a family? And I was fortunate enough to have a mother that had a special needs son, and I didn't respect her as much until I walked through her steps. But just seeing how she navigated her life and keeping her son involved in the family and trying to maximize his life, whereas supporting the rest of us, because I was the youngest of 7. So you can imagine, and back then, I'm 62 now, so you can do the math, but back then, they tended to institutionalize their children, but she refused that. So she was very strong. I saw her do a lot of things. When I was a child growing up, she would have to, back then they had, what do they call those? When you did recordings, nothing nice like this, but like they had the 2 big circular tapes that would run.
Oh,
that
I
just
do
shows
not know what that's called.
Okay, well, it's very old, but I remember that she was recording his school lessons on that because he couldn't use his vision, and so and at different times he would have different problems with his CNS system, his central nervous system, because he had a brain tumor. And because of that, at different times he couldn't hear, at different times he couldn't see. He had poor balance. He used to scoot around on his bottom. But again, I really was blessed in a way to see a warrior mom ahead of me and how she weathered her life and our lives with grace. And basically the rest of us, the other 6 kids, were all college educated. And I think we all grew up with an appreciation for life and for health and for opportunity that a lot of people don't have because we kind of saw what can happen if you don't have your health. So anyway, but this is not a talk about that. This is a talk about giving care to the caregiver and trying to support yourself so that you can support your family. And again, it started with a good education from watching my mom and how she lived. Mm-hmm. So anyway, Max came into our lives, and I learned pretty quick that you had to take care of basics, ABCs. And so for me, the basics were, airway. Max had a trach, and you had to keep that cleared and make sure he was breathing. And but it also fell into keeping my job. It fell into taking care of my then 3-year-old baby, who also had her, needs and and desires, along with my husband. And I guess I put myself in there. Maybe I shouldn't say that at the end. It kind of felt that way a lot of times. But I think with time, I learned to appreciate the importance that if I couldn't take care of myself, then I wouldn't be able to take care of them.
That's
so
right.
So anyway, that's when our adventure started. That was 23 years ago. It feels about 23 years.
So like we talked about, our theme this year for Feeling This Life is self-care. So if you were to say what self-care means to you, what would you say?
Well, I would say it's whatever it would take to keep my body, the machine, working. And I've evolved a little bit more since then, but I think on the early days, I would skimp on sleep, and I would try to do as many things as I could, but really the things that I ended up doing were the things that absolutely I had to do. And so, for instance, in the morning, and to this day I still have this habit, I get a protein bar and a glass of milk on my way out to the car to work, so that I'll have some sustenance. And so whether it's going to work or whether it's attending a surgery or a conference or whatever, I always get myself fed in the morning. Another habit that I've had from actually, I don't know, I guess you could call me spiritual, but I always start the day with reading the Bible. Mm-hmm. And when I was a teenager, I was involved in this group called the Navigators. I guess looking back, they were maybe a little bit of a cult. I'm Catholic by history, but anyways, I always tried to get in touch with God in the morning to sort of give me a trajectory or a boost for the day. And getting dressed, is important. You have to have clothes. It's the law. And there was always a, where did I have to be that day, And so I tried not to worry too much about the future, but the night before I would say, okay, well, I've got a hysterectomy at 7 at Baptist, so I need to be there by then. Or, Max has a eye appointment at 10, so I need to be there by then. And so I'd have my target time, and I would get myself ready, I would get the kids ready, and I would fly. And honestly, those early days, I was probably averaging about 6 hours of sleep a night. Mm-hmm. Now, I would highly recommend getting 8 or more if your body needs it, if it's possible. But really, for about 10 or 15 years, I'm not going to say flying by the seat of my pants, but it kind of felt that way. So anyways, now that I consider myself semi-retired, I'm only working about 32 hours a week, and so I fit in a lot more things to do. But even back then, I would do yoga once or twice a week, and I would try to eat healthy, and so I would basically keep my mind and soul together, but I did, as we were saying, I did kind of come up with a list of just little tidbits I've learned over the years of taking care of yourself, so you can take care of your family, and because we can take care of ourselves, because
That's right.
we're an important part of this ecosystem. God loves us, and if we'd only love ourselves as much as He loves us, I think we would probably take even better care of ourselves. But I would say there are several things I learned, and one is to have time for yourself. And this is time that's not involved with work or your family or even necessarily your husband. This would be time we spend with hobbies that we love. Like, for instance, Paige, we go on those quilting retreats, and I get to kind of let down my hair, and we have some good talks and making some pretty blankets, and those are good times. I also enjoy needle felting, and I'm actually a little obsessed with needle felting. It's where you take a ball of wool and you sculpt it into the shape of an animal. Well,
And Sarah is very, very good at it. Maybe we'll put some pictures of some of her creations in the show notes.
Oh, there you go. Yes. But I love it. It's always tied together, my love for animals and art, and it's a really nice hobby for me. I do a lot of gardening. I don't know if you call yoga a hobby, but I certainly enjoy it.
I think, it's a huge self-care, because I like what you were sharing about even just starting your day, sometimes thinking about, I am going to eat breakfast. That being the first thing you do of, okay, it needs to start here. And that beginning of that self-care with that, and even, with making sure that you are in tune with your body and it's quieting yourself.
Right. It's very critical because, if I don't eat something by 11, I get the shakes. And you don't want
the shakes.
That's right. You don't want the shakes for lots of reasons, but certainly not in a surgeon. So anyway, as I said, I got more practical, or I had to, really, to survive. And I have some other tips. Do you want me to go over them?
Yeah, please do.
Well, learn to say no. And what I mean by this, and again, I'm sure you've heard this kind of speech before, but there's so many things that we really don't have to do. A friend at work, their mother died, and you're close to her, and you met her mother once or twice, but do you really need to go to the funeral? Work parties, a lot of times, let's go out for this or that, but I found that unfortunately, just the nature of work parties, they tend to just feel like more work to me. So be comfortable with saying no. Pick your commitments, things that would support yourself and or your family, and don't feel guilty. That was hard for me as a Catholic, where there's so many things. I don't know if you're familiar with Catholicism, but one of our prayers is, God, forgive me for what I have done and what I have failed to do. Well, that's a pretty big swath there. So,
it is.
So anyways, but I was kind of raised with that ideology, so it's very easy to always worry about, I could have helped here, or I could have done this and that, but be comfortable with saying no.
Now, I have a question too about that. Have there ever been any times that you have had to say no in terms of your parenting or the things that you had your kids doing, or with anything with Max before?
Right. All the time. All the time.
Yeah, tell us about those. I want to know about that.
Yes, okay. Max is a black abyss of need. He looks awful on paper. As I say, you would think he couldn't do anything. But actually, he knows about 800 signs. He knows his Braille alphabet. He knows about 40 words by heart, how to braille. He has emerging reading skills. His favorite thing to do is to sign and to interact. Unfortunately, I'm about the only one that does that with him. Now, my husband has some basic signing, and my husband's very physical with him. He walks with him 2 to 3 miles a day, and he takes him everywhere he goes, Home Depot and Kroger's, and we get out and about and we go swimming. But I would say the most difficult thing has been to distance myself from Max. And that kind of brings me into one of my other tips of self-care or survival. That is limiting what you can do realistically with your child.
I love that you share that, because so many of the families that I work with experience a lot of that guilt around, oh, I need to be doing this. I need to be doing everything I can for my child. And sometimes the answer is that you don't have to.
Exactly.
So, yeah, tell us more.
Right, exactly. Well, I have found that what helps me, if I can set up a basic expectation of what I will do with him during the day. So, for instance, we get our 2 or 3 mile walk in, or I will do one episode of Braille with him where we have sort of a set beginning, middle, end of we call it our work time. And this is maybe 30, 40 minutes long. He loves it. One of the reasons is because it's just, his mind is so hungry, for interaction and to do things. But we do that every day. When COVID came around and he graduated early, I tried to do it twice a day. And it just got too much. It got too tedious. But I thought, if I can do this once a day. The other guarded time I have with Max is at nighttime. We read a book every day or every evening. And they're like, oh, we're reading Moon Patrol series. It's sort of a crazy book series, but it's probably level maybe 4th grade, 5th grade level. Dogs that save people, kids on camping adventures, that kind of topic. Anyways, I tend to stick with more concrete subjects because I have to sign to him as I read. So we read probably about 45 minutes, sometimes an hour a night, and I'll read, usually 1 to 2 chapters, and I'll try to, spice that up with, okay, it's time to go to the toilet, or, oh, we need to G-tube now. And so I'll negotiate doing some of these less favorable tasks with, the gift of reading. But he loves that time, and I do too. But, after that, I turn it off. And literally I'll say, Max, it's 10 p.m., it's time for bed. I might put Netflix on or grab my own book, and I comfortably resign my post as a mother. Now, Max is G-tube fed every 4 hours during the day, so it's not like I leave him on autopilot, and certainly we have a lot of help with him as well. But I'm just saying, if you can, or I've found that personally, if I can dedicate time to him during these endeavors, then I'm comfortable relaxing during the other times and not feeling so vested.
I like hearing you talk about your reading time with him. It sounds like that's a time where you guys are able to connect.
Yes,
it has
really.
a beginning and an end, and it's ended, and then it's time for you to go and care for yourself after that.
Yes, that's been a lot of fun. So again, I think that helps for me personally to alleviate, because he's, as I said, he's sort of a black hole of need. And if he had his way, I would be connected to him at the hip 24/7. We even sleep with him because he sleeps better in the evening with one of us. And every now and then he'll pop up and need to go to the bathroom. If he doesn't find his way, then we've got a real mess to take care of. So yeah, we try to limit. But even though I'm like next to him, or Garrett, my husband, is next to him, we still, I'll needle felt, while he's laying next to me, or again, read a book or watch Netflix. Usually watch Netflix, quite honestly.
That's good. Yeah, that's good self-care. So what else is on your list?
Well, after the learn to say no, it's also learn to say yes. And that is saying yes to anybody that offers to help you, or any activity or goods or whatever. So for example, let's say if Max has been out with the babysitter during the day, but he has a grandmother like figure that also watches him, she calls, maybe once a month, and it's like, oh yeah, he's yours. So instead of saying, oh, well, he just got back a couple hours ago, and it's like, no problem. You want to watch him, I'm sure he would enjoy your company. Garrett, every now and then it's probably more than every now and then. It's probably once every day or maybe two. But he'll fix something for me to eat. And so every now and then I'll have eaten before then. And it's tempting to say, oh, no, honey, I've already eaten. But, hey, if he's going to fix me something to eat, I eat it. So, but anytime somebody shows an act of kindness, even if your pride would want you to say no, say yes. Open up your heart.
I really like that. I have a lot of families I work with that they may have people offer to care for their child, and maybe that person doesn't know how yet, or maybe they don't do it the way that the parent would do it.
Right.
So have you ever experienced that?
Well, yes, because Max is sort of a complex child, and we communicate through tactile signing. So imagine American Sign Language, but on the body. And it's amazingly effective, but it's not a natural type of communication. So there's a lot of people that are intimidated to interact with Max, to be able to communicate with him and try to share ideas and expectations. So actually about whenever the Olympics were in Brazil 4 or 5 years ago, 6 maybe longer. Anyway.
The Rio Olympics.
Oh, Rio, that's right.
Yep.
Garrett, my daughter, Samantha, and myself, we went to those Olympics. So we got all our babysitters together, and we did this amazing trip, which was probably about close to 2 weeks. Pulled it off, no injuries. But when I came home, I started to worry a little bit about what would happen if something had happened to us. It just sort of made me wonder how, who could step into our shoes. So that's why I made those YouTube videos on Max and his communication. So, so I came home and I was inspired, and I did like 6 or 7 of them. But basically it was, how do you communicate? How do you feed? How do you dress? How do you negotiate with this child? And I just wanted to get something on the record so that if something were to happen to us, that someone could step in and have some idea. But what we use them for is we have a Michelle P. Waiver program, and that has been a godsend. When Max was first born, we had, I forget what they called it, a respite, or it was sort of a shortened version of that. But basically, I think we got like 60 hours of help nursing for 6 months. And then we moved on to the Michelle P. Waiver, which was much more generous. And then we were able to get 25 to 30 hours of help a week with Max. So where we got our help were students from, it was Spalding, I believe, OT program. And they were graduate level, and it was a 2 to 3 year program.
And for our listeners, Spalding is one of the universities that is in Louisville, and they have an occupational therapy program.
Yes, thank you, Paige. Anyway, so these kids were already in a health-related field. They were 25 or older because it was graduate level. They had their own cars. And so we sent out basically a note to one of their professors who passed along saying we were looking for help. And these kids were incredible. They were willing to think outside the box. They had a lot of enthusiasm. They had interest because they self-selected if they were willing to work with a child like Max, and used these videos that they could orient themselves. Because between all his, the cochlear implant, the hearing aid, and the G-tube, and, again, on paper, he looks like he'd just be, sit on a beanbag all day, but the reality, he's quite active and interactive, and this way the kids could take off running, and since they matriculate every 2 to 3 years, then we could just keep the flow of information. So that helped us a lot, is sharing that information.
And those videos we'll also link in the show notes, because there's something I actually use to educate a lot of my families about. This is where your child might be going in terms of how they use their communication symbols, or how they participate in G-tube feedings and things like that. But another thing I'm curious with those videos is, during and after you making them, how did that impact your mental health?
It gave me a great peace of mind. because I felt like in order to orient someone from a mother's standpoint, I think you had mentioned, a lot of parents feel uncomfortable that, would they be able to take care of this child like I would want them to be taken care of? It helped to alleviate some of that concern, because I felt like they were able to see a visual example, and I think a lot of them, after seeing those videos, they came in with higher expectations for what they could do with Max. They would pop him in a car, they'd take him to the mall, they would take him to an ice cream place and sit down and try to do some PO tasting, things that I don't think they would have done unless they had seen that it was possible.
That's really cool to hear about. Any more tips?
Why don't I just share a few other things? And again, this is going to be stuff you probably have heard before. But when you're in the trenches, especially like during the NICU times, or you're going through yet another surgery, take one day at a time. And if that's too much, then just take 12 hours, because anyone can survive that. Try not to look too much past that. Now again, fortunately, at 23, we were able to think a little bit more out of the box, but there will be those times where you'll be that desperate. The other thing I've learned is you don't have to do everything in one day. It's like you want to clean up the kitchen, or you want to put those things downstairs. It can wait. It can wait till tomorrow or the day after. It does not need to be done. Refer back to the first little bit about what needs to be done, like feeding yourself, getting yourself to the bathroom, getting yourself clothed, and getting yourself to work or wherever you need to be.
Yeah, that's knowing what to say no to, and that's knowing what to say yes to.
Absolutely. And a couple of other things. I read this in a book, and it really spoke to me. Don't let this tear your family apart. It's really easy when you're in a stressful situation and when somebody needs so much from you, and you as a mother, you feel like you need to give 100% to that child, but it's at the risk of neglecting your other children and or your husband. I can't speak for everybody, but I can tell you, even with Max, should I give him his fantasy mom of being there 24/7? Realistically, he might be a little bit more further along in independent dressing. Maybe he'd be going through those ropes in the backyard a little bit more independently. But the reality is he's Max, and we want to support him in everywhere we can. I'm glad that I went to my daughter's school events. I really honestly wish I had spent more time with her had I been able. But I'm doing that now. This is that going back to saying no. Like, for instance, just a recent example, at our wedding, Samantha's wedding, my daughter got married about a year or so ago. I decided that was her day, and my blinders were towards her. And so we had a relatively new caregiver who was with Max, and God bless her, she was willing to work with him and be with him during the wedding, but they hadn't really established their rapport yet. And I could hear, he was sitting behind us a couple of chairs back, and I could hear some, rustling going on, and it's like, I'm not looking back. And from what I heard, he was carried out by my niece and this new caregiver. And I just, that's sort of an extreme example, but sometimes you just have to do what you have to do.
And I love to hear that you chose to focus on Samantha, whereas it would be so tempting
to jump back there and say, "Oh, Max,"
to put out that fire.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, that's really powerful, Sarah. I'm glad you shared that, and I want for our listeners to hear that sometimes it's okay. Just let somebody else step in when it's breaking your heart that you really want to, but that there is, at this time, there's something that is a bigger priority.
That's right.
In this moment.
Right. So. There are more lives involved. And then something else that struck me, that I was working with one of my partners, and he actually was like certified in hospice. And I'm not even sure how you get certified in helping people die, but he was. And I was telling him about Max, and it was just sort of this, we're doing this and we're doing that. And he looked at me, and somehow he read me between my words. And he said, Max has his own journey. And it kind of struck me, because I think I was so used to being entwined with his life that it was hard to see me separate from him. And it kind of helped me say, okay, Max is actually relatively content. He could lay on his back for 4 hours and be happy as a lark. And I think so many times my expectations of him or myself, really interfere, with a lot of his comfort and what he would perhaps choose to do otherwise. So anyways, as I said, he has his journey and I have mine, and we have to respect both.
Mm-hmm.
So now, husband. Okay. We've been married going on 38 years now. We were college sweethearts, and we had no idea, as I'm sure most of you parents, that this was coming down the pike. So we had a strong relationship going into parenting. And actually, as I said, I won't bore you with all the details of our infertility, but we really, really wanted to be parents. And had 5 years of medical bills to prove that. And it's just, so when they came along, we were ready. But we weren't ready for Max. And honestly, I don't think ever anyone would be ready for a child like this. So a couple things. We decided early on, or I decided, being an OB/GYN, I realized that intercourse is very important in a marriage, and that can affect the family, as well as yourself. So basically, early on, we established date night once a week. And early on in those tough 10 years, that basically was 15 minutes on Wednesday afternoon. It kept us together, and to this day, Wednesday has very special meaning for us. Garrett's been an incredible man, an incredible father. He wasn't born that way. He grew into this role. I'm very grateful to have him. As far as keeping us together, now we have more time. We've done a lot of traveling, but honestly, the first time we've been on vacation with just he and I was last February. So we were thinking, okay, Mantha's 25, so in 25 years, so I am not touting that as a way of life, but just to show you that, sometimes, you have to deal with priorities, but we were having the time of our lives. And we went to Israel, we went to the Holy Lands, and now we're planning our next big vacation because that angel that watched Max is willing to watch Max, for up to 2 weeks, and she has some backup help as well. Relationship, there's not a better gift you can give your children, better than an intact mom and dad. And in a way, that it sounds a bit selfish to focus on your mate. But if that means keeping the marriage alive and keeping that relationship solid, then it is well worth it. We're best friends. You already fight over the little things. Like, let's say, oh, should Johnny have a cookie before dinner? So imagine that argument is, should you get a cochlear implant for your son or just keep, forging ahead with a hearing aid?
Sometimes the stakes are a lot higher.
The stakes are higher, the chronic stress, the sleep deprivation, the survival instinct of where, you just take care of your kid and nothing else matters. Those things can really sneak up on you if you allow them to take over. So you really need to step back and again think, not only how do I take care of myself, but how do I take care of my mate? And part of the yoga, and the eating healthy and trying to live a moderate life is to be a good mate for your significant other. So yeah, Garrett and I have been through a lot, and I can't even imagine at this point in our lives anyone else that would have done what he has done and has stuck it out and has always risen to the challenge. We were there for each other. We support each other for our desires. Like, for instance, the quilting camp. He loves it when I go away. But I know it's hard for him because he takes care of Max 24/7. But in turn, I let him train he just did this 340-mile kayak ride up in Missouri. Well, it actually got canceled midway because of weather, but he trained for it, and Max and I were the ground crew. I was thrilled to do that for him because, it's something he was excited about, and it kept him healthy. It keeps us healthy. And I love to reciprocate because, again, this coming week I'm going on a needle felting camp with my sister, and we're going to be gone, as Garrett says, 5 days and 4 nights because I tried to do the 4-day thing and he did the math, but still he was very supportive. So we have supported each other. But you know what? It is easier to do now that I'm semi-retired. Back 10 years ago, Garrett was doing Ironman. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that, but it's where I think you swim 2.5 miles, you ride a bicycle for like 30 miles, I don't know, and then you do a marathon. But he was also starting his own business. He had a lot of stress. He was always the backup because my schedule was inflexible. So if a child got sick or if something needed to be done, you could count on him. So he had a lot of stresses. But I'm just saying, I'd come home after a 12-hour workday, and then he'd say, "Oh, I got to go train," and then he would disappear for 4 or 5 hours running. I wasn't really excited about that, but I think in my hardware of mind, not really my heart, but my mind, I knew this was something he had to do. And I think his level of stress was so high that he needed to have that physical release, or else he would have just exploded. So even though it was at the time difficult, even back then I supported his well-being. Again, now that I consider myself semi-retired, it's a lot easier to support each other. But even when it was hard, we still supported each other.
That's good to hear. Thinking about what you said when you just come home and he's ready to leave.
Yes.
I can see that being a situation where it would be easy to say, "Oh, I just got home from work.
Right.
What are you doing?" But I like that I don't even know if you're giving people this advice, but that thought of your feelings might feel one way, and it's good to acknowledge your feelings, but then also coming back into your mind and thinking, okay, I need to give him permission to do these things, and I need to support him in what he needs to do to care for himself. So
So it's really a team, and I felt almost like we were like passing the baton back and forth. Really, there was a really tough 10 years in there. Again, I clung to these principles of faith and taking care of yourself and taking care of your family. But, it was a lot of faith. Actually, I wrote this down, I didn't want to misquote the Bible, but Philippians 4:13, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." And those were words I lived by, and I still do, though it is a lot easier now.
Yeah, I'm sure it is, yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about Max and how you help him to practice self-care.
Well, right, with Max, the things we do for him, our activities of daily living, are actually for us opportunity for engagement, such as like brailing, teaching, reading and writing and arithmetic. Actually, Garrett works with him on blocks and counting. But we actually do yoga a couple times.
You do yoga with him?
Yes.
Oh, cool.
And we do the deep breathing and the half moon and the swan and the warrior, and we're working on the tree. It's a little awkward for him. He has a lot of balance issues. But basically, I lean up against the bathroom sink, and then he lines up against my body in front, like we're both a starfish. And then, we start off with I don't know what they call that, the deep breathing, like the bellows. I don't know if you do yoga.
I do a little bit, but I don't know any of the terms. I just deep breathe.
Okay, so anyways, but with the elbows up and the chin and this and that. And he has scoliosis and hypotonia and some other issues, but I get that little crooked body of his stretched out as much as I can, and we bring up, and then we do as I said, the half moon, and he does okay. He does okay, but he loves it. And again, things that, like I was doing yoga just as a point of survival at some point in my life, and and I enjoy it now, but just anytime he gets a chance to interact. As far as dressing, he can dress independently. He can brush his teeth by himself, but it still requires a lot of support. One thing I kind of gave up on, and not that, again, I don't know about your all's children and what their potentials are. I guess as a young parent, I always envisioned Max being able to live on his own, or maybe in a group setting, with other disabled adults. I think now living our reality is that will never happen. We will take care of him and support him as long as we physically can. So as far as his true independence, yes, I wish he were more independent, but doing our activities of daily life is what we call normal now, what we call life. And I was thinking at one point about employment, like, oh, he could fill a vending machine, and he could wipe down tables at a restaurant or this or that, and COVID came along, and he has lots of respiratory issues and difficulty dealing with his saliva. so it just and the reality is it would probably take 2 to 3 people just to support him to work several times a week, and not that that's not a good lesson for society and not worthwhile, but I think at least at this point in our lives, we're just enjoying each other and enjoying the days and our walks and cuddling and our reading, and just enjoy the days that God has given us. And I've kind of let some of my expectations for him and independent living by the wayside, and now we've developed a long-term life, probably, hopefully, for the next 20 years. And what I mean by that is we have a single-floor ranch, and we have a large fenced-in yard, and we've developed a Shangri-La out there. We've got a little waterfall, we've got a hot tub, we have a beautiful patio, hummingbird feeders, and we just delight being outside. My husband is a big gardener now. I just canned some salsa, made some spaghetti sauce about a month ago, and we have a swing, and we have a hammock, and we have an enclosed garden. And one of my hopes was to put a rope to one, a chain to another, and perhaps a string to the third, and that Max would initiate going outside, oh, I want to go swinging today, so I'm going to follow this rope. I know that that's going to take me to the swing. Hasn't done that so far, but we are set up for that. And so yeah, I would love for him to be more independent, but the reality is someone's going to have to G-tube feed him. Someone's going to have to get his clothes cleaned and laid out. I mean, he can help put them in the washing machine, but he will always need assistance. And I'm okay with that. It's been a long journey to wrap my head around that, but that makes taking care of myself all the more important, because this isn't a sprint, this is a marathon.
It is. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Sarah, for sharing
You're
your
welcome.
journey and for sharing Max's journey and your family's journey with us. And I'm excited for our listeners to be able to hear this.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to Sarah for sharing her story with us and sharing her relationship with Max and her family. So Sarah gave lots of advice to our family. So I'm curious, Cathy and Jenny, what do you feel like your favorite piece of advice was that she gave?
So my favorite was having her talk about that it was really important to get through that day and living in the moment. I think we are always thinking about what we should be doing next, and that maybe that's not as important as it could be. I have a sister-in-law who has always told me that the most important thing to do is take care of all the living things in your house first, and then you can worry about so the people, the pets, the plants, and so is everybody eating? Does everybody have water? Is everybody comfortable? And then you can start worrying about the other things, because those things are just not as important. And maybe the bathroom doesn't get cleaned today, but it will soon enough. So I think it's really important that parents are okay with just getting through the day on some of those days. How about you, Jenny?
Yeah, I like how that's a good example of, or a good motto to live by, take care of the living things. So, yeah, I think, for me, I think my favorite part of it was how you can say no. I feel like we all know that, but that a lot of times, a lot of us need to hear someone tell you that that's okay. Because it just seems like in our society that it's always, what can I do next? What can I do now? And just to hear that it's okay to say no, even to, like, she talked about how she's even, like, said no to going to funerals or work parties. So things that you feel like are essential, like if you feel like, I have to go to this work party because it's a work thing, but really it's social, it's okay to say no. And she said something like, regardless of how involved your child's care is, it's okay to make choices. And I think she was referring to making choices of things to do, like whether you stay home or have someone else come in and help. But I wanted to ask you, Paige, as a parent, when there's like lots of therapies and everything and you're feeling overwhelmed, what do providers think if you one week say, like, hey, this is too much for me, I cannot do that this week? Because, well, I want everyone to hear me. Don't cancel on your provider at the last minute. Please don't cancel on your provider at the last minute. But there were times when I knew, like on a Monday, that by that appointment on that Thursday, I was going to be losing it and it was too much for me. But I didn't want to cancel because I thought that you or whoever the provider is would think that I was a bad parent or wasn't doing what I should for my kid or cared enough about my kid. So, like, how do you feel about that?
Anytime that anybody has ever done that, I always feel like I have more respect for them. Like, it's kind of the opposite maybe of how a family might feel, like, oh no, they're going to think I'm a bad parent. But really, I think that you're a good parent for doing that sometimes, because when we're in a home visit together, sometimes, well, actually all the time, it is a partnership between the family and me. And if you come to your home visit, or if I come to you for a home visit, and there's other things on your mind, you're not able to focus on working on strategies or practicing things or reflecting, then it's worse use, I think, of our time. So if families need that time to just practice some self-care, to, get done whatever they need to get done, so that whenever we do meet for our next visit that we schedule, then I know that they're going to be able to be more present, and we're actually going to be able to get more done, and I'm going to be able to help them more. So really, I feel like I have more respect for families that do that. So yeah, definitely, if you're a family listening, canceling at the last minute is really hard. But, if looking at your week, wow, I know my kiddo is not sleeping super well this week, or I know that we have multiple doctor's appointments and I'm not going to be able to be as present as I want to, or I'm not even really sure if I can give what I need to think about strategies and to think about how to help kind of rise above the water. Like, if you just feel like you're treading water that week, please just let me know, because, it's my job to support you, and I only know what you tell me, and I want everybody to be successful in our home visits. So yeah, I definitely have a lot more respect for families whenever they have the courage to tell me that.
I agree, because families need to know what they can do. And if we make a suggestion or we talk about a strategy and you can't do it, then you need to speak up, because it's just a suggestion, right? And so maybe at this point, it's not going to work for your family, but maybe you can think about it later and see if it works then. I mean, it's really important that the families that we work with are ready and able to do the things that are good for them at that time. Again, living in the moment, right? So what is happening at the moment? So what stood out for you, Paige?
I would say that in addition to the saying no, I really liked how Sarah talked about both saying yes and saying no, knowing what to say yes to and knowing what to say no to. And I loved how she, again, had the courage to say that there are times that she needs to say no to even Max for, there are ways that he wants her to be there for him. And she knows that she has to end the day with knowing that she did these certain things with him and for him that were a priority, so that she's able to say yes to caring for herself. And then also kind of along those same lines of knowing to say yes whenever people are offering to help you. And that it kind of brings me to that idea of her YouTube videos and her YouTube channel that she started. I really like kind of that idea of, even using technology, using that kind of thing to be able to say yes to people offering to help her. So
I think the YouTube channel is a great idea. So, I mean, what a powerful way to help people who want to care for your child and you're not sure exactly what to do. And even if I would think if I was trying to take care of a child with complex needs like that, and if I was there, if I knew that YouTube channel was there, I could be like, now what did she say again? And I could just go back and look at it again. What a great way to, like you said, to use technology. Have you seen those videos?
I have. I use those videos very frequently with my families. So we were just talking about it is a very good idea to live day to day and to be satisfied, at the end of the day that, you kept the things alive and you kept yourself alive and your child alive. But then also sometimes it is a good idea to be thinking about the future and what you want for your child, not from a worrying standpoint, but from a how can I make what I do today really meaningful. So one of my favorite little video clips that Sarah created within those YouTube videos is how she does a YouTube feed for him. So we know that Max is an adult now, and he relies primarily on YouTube for his meals. One of the ways that Sarah communicates with him and encourages him to be like an active participant in that, and then therefore with any of his caregivers, are that like she encourages him to like lift up your shirt so that I can attach your G-tube, lay in this position, like position yourself so that you can be part of this. And I really like for my families to be able to see that during a mealtime, during any daily routine, this is a great example of how we can be mindful about how we encourage our child to participate. So oftentimes it might feel like whenever you're doing a G-tube feed that you are just, you're putting calories in. But whenever you look at those videos with Max, Sarah is really intentional about encouraging him and allowing him to be an active participant. So I'd like to show those videos to my families because I think it's a good way to show that you can use those day-to-day moments as meaningful opportunities, because maybe you think, it's possible that my child may use a G-tube long-term to get their nutrition. But also, I want them to be an active participant, and this is what it looks like in an adult, and this is also how I can set things up for my child and encourage them while they're little to become an active participant so that as they grow, they can continue with learning those skills and with using that and being an active participant in their mealtime. So there's so many more examples than that, but I think that's one of my favorite ones. That it's a good resource, I think, to use to help help my families and help my kiddos learn and consider, like what life might be like whenever they're an adult and how that might impact what strategies that they use right now. So I really like that.
That's great. She makes it a mealtime, right? So they're having a mealtime whether or not they're all eating the same or not, which is awesome.
Now, one of the things that I think is really unique about Sarah's interview is that she talked about her marriage, her relationship with her partner. So, Cathy, from a research and data perspective, what do you have to share with us about relationships among caregivers with kiddos with special needs?
Well, I want to share because I did a little digging on this because there's some negative sayings out there or beliefs out there about how having a child with a disability affects a marriage. And hopefully Jenny can share with us what the good things are for her. But as far as research, the news is good. So those sayings that you hear are not true. So most marriages that have children with disabilities do not end in divorce. There's been some really good research. There was a longitudinal cross-sectional study from 1957 to 2006 that looked at families who have a child with disability, and most of them did not end up getting divorced. There's less divorce. So that is a good thing. So be careful what you hear. Sometimes when you Google things, you get bad news. But the real news is that it seems to have a very small effect. Some of the things that do affect it is the size of the family. And what's interesting is families who have children with disability, most of them are older, so they got married older or they had children older. And those families with older parents are less likely to get divorced. So that is the piece, not necessarily that they have a child with a disability, but families that the parents get married when they're older have definitely less divorce. Anyway, it's a very small effect. Don't be frightened by anything that you hear about statistics. Do your research and be encouraged that actually divorce is less. And I wonder if it's because, I can't say this from a research perspective, but I wonder if it's because you do have to be more intentional with your time, including giving yourself some self-care and take care. Jenny, do you want to tell us what it's like to be married?
Yeah, so I'm no expert or anything, but
sure you are expert.
Well, I'd always heard that the divorce rate is higher too, so that's really interesting to hear the actual research, and I never really thought about, you should check that stuff out. So that's like super encouraging that that's not true. I do sometimes, when I had heard that in the past, I thought to myself like, well, I couldn't do this alone, so I'm definitely not gonna get divorced because I'm scared. But I guess for our marriage, I think you're right about being intentional about things. But for us, being intentional is almost, I guess I would say, being flexible. So we don't have the ability to say every Saturday night is date night, or once a month on this date we're doing date night. That's just not going to work with the kids' schedules and our jobs, things like that. So I think for us, we try to take advantage of having time together whenever we can. So, for example, my husband's a pastor and he obviously does funerals. And most of the time, they're people from our church. So I go with him to the funeral, and we already have childcare for that. So we'll go out to dinner after that. So it's not, anything that was planned in advance, but we know we have this moment here. So let's take advantage of it, because we're not going to be able to say, oh, tomorrow we can do it or next week we can do it. Another thing that we like to do is driving the car, because we actually have time to talk and there's not people interrupting us. So if we have to go somewhere, the same place, we will always, we try to ride together. That way we have just those couple minutes to talk, because if we try to talk at home, there's kids interrupting us and everything. So just trying to be intentional about where and when. We always say, like, our favorite date, we'll order pizza and eat it in the car. And I know we're weird, but
that's great.
The kids aren't interrupting us, and we're not at a restaurant where we know people and then they're going to interrupt us. So, like, we can actually just talk. So it's nothing exciting, no rom-com over here or anything, but
I think it sounds very romantic to sit in your car and eat pizza. I might have to try that. I don't know. That's awesome.
But in all honesty, I have to confess, I've never kept a plant alive. So
okay, it's okay. But it's not your priority, right? That's okay. Thanks, Paige, for sharing Sarah's story with us. It's been great.
Thank you so much for listening to Feeling This Life. Did you know that this podcast is actually part of a research study? By filling out the survey in the show notes, you can help our community learn more about how podcasts impact those who care for children who are blind and visually impaired. So please take a look when you're able. Also, if you'd like to support us in making more episodes of Feeling This Life, look for the donation link in the show notes. The show notes also include links to resources related to today's episode and ways to get in contact with us. Please join us again next time for another episode of Feeling This Life.